The hammer slipped from my grip, clattering against the concrete foundation. I'd been staring at the same beam for 10 minutes, my mind elsewhere. The Riverside construction project was supposed to be my crown jewel, a $20 million shopping complex that would cement my reputation. Instead, I couldn't focus on anything except the sick feeling in my gut. My name is Marcus Sullivan, though everyone calls me Tank. 42 years old, built like the bulldozers I operate, with hands that have poured more concrete and driven more nails than most men see in a lifetime. I started Sullivan Construction with nothing but a used pickup and a toolbox my father left me. 15 years later, I employ 67 people and own enough equipment to level a city block. But success means nothing when your wife looks at you like you're a stranger. Vivian had been distant for months. Late nights, showing properties, weekend trips with her sister Lisa, and that new habit of checking her phone every 5 minutes. When I asked about it, she'd roll her eyes and mutter something about me being paranoid. Maybe I was. Maybe 20 years of marriage and 12-hour workdays had made me suspicious of shadows. I should have finished the beam measurements, but Tommy Martinez, my foreman, was handling the crew just fine. Tommy, we called him Bulldog for obvious reasons, had been with me since the beginning. Ex-Marine, built like a brick wall, loyal as they come. If Tommy was running the site, I could afford to leave early. The drive home took me past Diego's barbershop on 5th Street. Diego's Cuts, pretentious name for a place that looked like it catered to wannabe gangsters and soccer players. I'd never been inside, but I'd driven past it 1,000 times. That's when I saw Vivian's silver BMW parked outside. At first I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe she was showing a property nearby. But as I pulled into the auto parts store across the street, I could see through the shop's large front window. Vivian sat in Diego's chair, laughing at something he'd said. His hands were on her shoulders, massaging her neck while she leaned back, eyes closed, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. My chest tightened. I grabbed my phone and started recording. Diego Morales. I knew the name from local business association meetings. Smooth-talking pretty boy with perfect hair and a smile that made women forget they were married. He was running his fingers through Vivian's hair now, leaning close to whisper something that made her giggle like a teenager. Then she stood up, smoothed her dress, and pulled an envelope from her purse. A thick envelope. She handed it to Diego, who thumbed through what looked like a substantial amount of cash. He nodded, said something, and kissed her cheek. My hands shook as I recorded every second. Vivian walked out, checked her reflection in the window, and drove away. I sat in my truck for another hour watching Diego close up shop. When he finally locked the door and walked to his Mustang, I saw him pull out his phone and make a call. Even from across the street, I could see him grinning. That night, Vivian came home at 11:30. "Sorry, babe," she said, kissing my forehead as I sat in my recliner, pretending to watch TV. The Martinez listing took forever. Buyers were so picky. I nodded, studying her face. Fresh makeup, hair perfect, not a strand out of place, despite supposedly spending 3 hours showing a house. "How was your day?" she asked, settling on the couch. "Fine. Finished the foundation pour at Riverside." "That's nice." She was already scrolling through her phone. I wanted to confront her right then, show her the video, demand an explanation. But something held me back. Maybe it was the memory of my father's advice. Never go into battle without knowing your enemy's full strength. The next morning, I called Sarah Kim. Sarah had been my lawyer since I incorporated the business. Sharp as a blade, ruthless when necessary, and smart enough to see around corners. If anyone could help me figure out what Vivian was planning, it was her. "Marcus," she said when I walked into her downtown office. "You look like hell." "Feel worse?" I showed her the video. Sarah watched without expression, then leaned back in her chair. "How long has this been going on?" "No idea. Months, maybe longer. You want a divorce? I want to know what I'm dealing with first. That cash she gave him. That wasn't tip money. Sarah's fingers drummed against her desk. I'll make some calls. In the meantime, check your accounts. Check everything. If she's planning something, money's usually the first weapon. I spent the rest of the day going through every bank statement, credit card bill, and business expense from the past 6 months. What I found made my blood run cold. Vivian had been systematically draining our joint accounts, small amounts, carefully spaced to avoid triggering alerts. $27,000 over 4 months. Money that was supposed to fund our vacation to Ireland, our new kitchen renovation, the emergency fund we'd built over 2 decades. But that wasn't the worst part. She'd also been making inquiries about my business. Sarah called that evening with information that hit me like a sledgehammer. Marcus, you need to sit down. I'm listening. Vivian hired Robert Chen 3 weeks ago. He's a divorce attorney, but not just any divorce attorney. This guy specializes in destroying small business owners. His clients walk away with half of everything, even when they contributed nothing. My grip tightened on the phone. What else? She's been building a case against you. Claims you're emotionally abusive, that you've hidden assets, that the business is marital property despite your prenup. Chen's good at making these things stick. The prenup should protect, not if she can prove fraud or duress, and Chen's creative when it comes to evidence. I closed my eyes. So what do? We prepare. Document everything. Your work schedule, your income, every penny you've spent on the business. And Marcus? Yeah? Don't confront her yet. Let her think she's winning. The next week was torture. I watched Vivian play the loving wife while simultaneously planning my destruction. She cooked my favorite meals, asked about my day, even suggested we plan that trip to Ireland, all while bleeding me dry behind my back. Friday night, she announced we were having dinner with her sister Lisa. Nothing fancy, she said. Just Giuseppe's. Lisa's been stressed about her divorce. Giuseppe's was the most expensive restaurant in town. Italian place downtown where entrees started at $40 and wine cost more than some people made in a day. I agreed because I was curious. Vivian rarely wanted to eat out during the week. We arrived at 7. Lisa was already there, looking uncomfortable in a dress that probably cost more than my truck payment. With her sat a man I didn't recognize. Asian, early 50s, expensive suit, carnivory smile. Marcus, Vivian said, sliding into the booth. This is Robert Chen. He's been helping Lisa with her legal issues. Chen extended his hand. His grip was firm, confident, the grip of a man who'd never done honest work. Mr. Sullivan, I've heard so much about you. Dinner started normally enough. Small talk about the weather, Lisa's custody battle, my construction projects. But as the wine flowed and the main courses arrived, the conversation took a darker turn. You know, Marcus, Chen said, cutting his $50 steak. Men in your position often overlook certain vulnerabilities. What kind of vulnerabilities? Business partnerships can be complicated when personal relationships change. Vivian was studying her plate, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. I'm not sure I follow, I said. Chen smiled. Well, for instance, if a marriage were to end, the division of assets can be quite complex, especially when one spouse has been the primary breadwinner while the other sacrificed career opportunities to support the family. My fork clinked against my plate. Interesting theory. Oh, it's more than theory. Texas is a community property state. Everything acquired during marriage belongs equally to both spouses, regardless of who earned it. Lisa fidgeted with her napkin. Vivian finally looked up, her eyes meeting mine across the table. Of course, Chen continued, these matters often resolve more amicably when both parties are reasonable. That's when I understood. This wasn't a casual dinner. This was an ambush. Vivian had brought her lawyer to threaten me in public, thinking I'd be too civilized to make a scene. She was wrong. You know what, Bob? Can I call you Bob? I said, leaning forward. I think you've mistaken me for someone who scares easily. Chen's smile faltered. I'm simply discussing hypotheticals. No, you're threatening me in front of my wife, using my money to pay for the privilege. I stood up, pulled out my wallet, and dropped $200 on the table. Dinner's on me. Consider it my contribution to whatever game you're playing. I looked at Vivian. She was pale, her hands shaking slightly. I'll see you at home, I said quietly. We'll talk. Then I walked out, leaving them to finish their expensive meal and their expensive plans. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to Tommy's house in the suburbs. His wife Maria answered the door, took one look at my face, and called for Tommy. Jesus, Tank, you look like someone died. Someone did. My marriage. We sat on his back porch, drinking beer while I told him everything. The affair, the money, the lawyer. Tommy listened without interruption, his jaw getting tighter with each detail. So, what's the play? He asked when I finished. I don't know. Sarah says to document everything, build a defense. But Chen's reputation? F Chen. F all of them. Tommy crushed his beer can. You built that company from nothing. You employ half the construction workers in this county. You think some slick lawyer's gonna waltz in and take it? Law's the law, Tommy. So is justice. And sometimes they ain't the same thing. I stayed at Tommy's that night. Called Vivian to say I was too tired to drive home, that I'd see her in the morning. She sounded relieved. Saturday morning I drove to the office to think. Sullivan Construction operated out of a converted warehouse on the industrial side of town. My office was on the second floor, overlooking the equipment yard where millions of dollars worth of machinery sat like sleeping giants. I'd built all this. Every rivet, every contract, every payroll. Vivian had contributed exactly nothing except spending the profits. That's when Sarah called. Marcus, we have a problem. What now? Chen filed an emergency injunction. As of Monday morning, your business assets are frozen, pending a full audit. He can't do that. He did. Claims you've been hiding income using company funds for personal expenses. The usual BS, but it'll stick long enough to cripple your operations. My vision blurred with rage. Sarah, there's more. Vivian's claiming domestic misuse, says she's afraid for her safety, needs a restraining order. That's insane. I've never touched her. Doesn't matter. Judge signed it an hour ago. You can't go within 500 feet of your house. I sank into my chair, staring at the framed photo on my desk. Vivian and me on our wedding day, young and happy and stupid. Her in white, me in my dress uniform, both of us believing in forever. What else? I asked. Bank accounts are frozen too, business and personal. Chen's moving fast, trying to lock everything down before you can react. So what do I do? Officially? Follow the law. Stay away from your wife, don't touch any business funds, and let me fight this in court. And unofficially? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Marcus, I've known you for 8 years. You're a good man. Honest, hard-working, loyal to a fault. But if you go down the path I think you're considering, what path? The path where good men become something else. Because that's what this is, Marcus. This is war. And in war, good men don't always win. After hanging up, I sat in the silence of my office, watching dust motes dance in the afternoon sunlight. 20 years of marriage, 15 years building a business, all of it crumbling because my wife decided she wanted a new life and didn't care who she destroyed to get it. That's when the anger really hit. Not the hot, explosive rage that makes men do stupid things. This was different. Cold. Calculating. The kind of anger that builds infrastructure and moves mountains and crushes everything in its path. I picked up my phone and called Detective Ray Morrison. Ray and I went back to Middle East, where we'd served in the same engineering unit. He'd saved my life during a mortar attack in Kandahar, and I'd returned the favor when his Humvee hit an IED outside Kabul. That kind of bond doesn't fade with time. Tank? Jesus, it's been months. How you doing? Been better, Ray. I need a favor. Name it. You know anything about a guy named Diego Morales? Runs a barbershop on 5th Street. Diego? Yeah, that a hole's been on our radar for months. Why? He's been screwing my wife. Ray was quiet for a beat. I'm sorry, man. That sucks. What kind of radar? The kind where we think he's running more than a barbershop. Money laundering, maybe some gambling debts. Nothing we can prove yet, but if someone were to give us a reason to look closer, we might find something interesting. That night, I drove past Diego's shop 3 times. The last time, I parked across the street and waited. At 9:15, Diego locked up and walked to his car. Before he could drive away, I was standing next to his window. We need to talk, I said. Diego rolled down the window, all smiles and white teeth. Hey, you're Marcus, right? Vivian's husband. She talks about you all the time. I bet she does. His smile faltered. Everything okay, man? Get out of the car. Look, if this is about... Get out of the freaking car. Diego climbed out slowly, hands visible. He was smaller than he looked in the barber shop, maybe 5'8", gym muscles under a tight polo shirt. Pretty boy used to getting his way with charm and good looks. Whatever Vivian told you? I grabbed him by the throat and slammed him against his car. His eyes went wide, hands clawing at my grip. Vivian didn't tell me anything, I said quietly. I saw you. Both of you. In your shop. Diego tried to speak, but I was cutting off his air supply. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to stop screwing my wife. You're going to close your shop and leave town. And you're going to do it quietly. I released my grip. Diego gasped, rubbing his throat. You can't just... I can do whatever I want. You want to test me? Diego looked around the empty street, probably hoping for witnesses. There were none. She came to me, man. I didn't pursue her. I don't care. And it's not just physical. She's in love with me. That hit harder than I expected. Not because I was surprised, but because hearing it out loud made it real. Then you can be in love somewhere else. Diego straightened his shirt, some of his bravado returning. What if I say no? I smiled, not a nice smile. Then you'll find out why they call me Tank. Monday morning brought fresh hell. The restraining order meant I couldn't go home, couldn't even drive past my house. The asset freeze meant I couldn't pay my crews, couldn't buy materials, couldn't keep Sullivan Construction operational. I was effectively homeless and broke, despite having $3 million sitting in frozen accounts. Tommy picked me up at the motel where I'd spent the night. This is screwed, he said, handing me coffee and a breakfast burrito. The guys are asking questions. Nobody understands why payday's been canceled. What did you tell them? Legal issues. Temporary delay. But Tank, some of these guys live paycheck to paycheck. They can't afford to wait. I stared out the windshield at the morning traffic. Normal people going to normal jobs, dealing with normal problems. None of them had their lives stolen by their spouse and a corrupt lawyer. Any word from Sarah? She's working on it, but Chen's good. Every motion she files, he counters. Every argument she makes, he blocks. It's like he's been planning this for months. Because he had been. This wasn't spontaneous. Vivian had been working with Chen for weeks, maybe months, building a case designed to destroy me. There's something else, Tommy said. Got a call from Ray Morrison this morning. And Diego's shop burned down last night. I turned to stare at him. What? Electrical fire, according to the preliminary report. Total loss. Nobody hurt, but the building's gone. A cold satisfaction settled in my chest. Shame. Tank, please tell me you didn't... I didn't touch his shop. which was true. I hadn't. But I'd made a phone call to someone who knew someone who specialized in making problems disappear. Sometimes the direct approach isn't the best approach. Christ, Tommy muttered, this is getting out of hand. No, it's just getting started. That afternoon, I met Sarah at a coffee shop downtown. She looked exhausted, her usually perfect appearance rumpled from long nights fighting Chen's legal barrage. I have news, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. Good and bad. Bad first. Chen's filing additional charges. Claims you've been stalking Vivian, threatening her, engaging in witness intimidation. Witness intimidation? Apparently, Diego Morales filed a police report. Says you threatened him outside his shop Friday night. Son of a witch. The good news is, I found something. Remember those financial records you gave me? I had a forensic accountant go through them. Sarah pulled out a manila folder, thick with documents. Vivian's been busier than we thought. The money she took from your accounts? It didn't go to living expenses. It went to Robert Chen, to a private investigator, and to something called Southwest Property Solutions. Never heard of it. Because it doesn't exist. It's a shell company registered 3 months ago to an address that turns out to be a vacant lot. But guess who's listed as the managing partner? My chest tightened. Vivian. Bingo. She's been funneling money into a fake business, probably to hide assets, or make it look like you owe her money for services rendered. Classic fraud. For the first time in days, I felt something like hope. Can we use this? Absolutely. But Marcus, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Shoot. Did you burn down Diego's barber shop? No. Do you know who did? I met her eyes. What difference does it make? Sarah sighed. The difference is between fighting dirty and committing felonies. If you're connected to that fire, even tangentially, Chen will use it to destroy you. Chen's already trying to destroy me. Then don't give him ammunition. That evening, Tommy and I sat in the motel room, eating Chinese takeout and planning our next move. The TV droned in the background, local news covering the barbershop fire. The reporter interviewed neighbors, showing footage of the charred remains. Investigators say the cause appears to be electrical, the reporter said, but they haven't ruled out arson. Turn it off, I said. Tommy reached for the remote, then froze. Holy crap. On screen, Vivian stood outside Diego's burned shop, tears streaming down her face. She was being interviewed, playing the role of concerned friend and neighbor. Diego's such a good man, she said into the camera. He doesn't deserve this. Nobody does. Do you think this fire was intentional? The reporter asked. Vivian glanced around nervously. I don't know, but Diego mentioned that someone had been threatening him, someone who didn't want him in the neighborhood. My blood went cold. She's setting you up, Tommy said. That witch is actually setting you up for arson. I grabbed my phone and called Ray Morrison. Ray, you watching Channel 7? Yeah, I saw it. Tank, tell me you had nothing to do with that fire. I didn't light any matches. That's not what I asked. I had nothing to do with the fire. Ray was quiet for a moment. Good. Because Chen's already called the department, demanding we investigate you for arson and intimidation. If there was any connection, there isn't. Okay, but Tank, whatever you're planning, be careful. This guy Chen has connections all over the courthouse. Judges, prosecutors, other lawyers. He's building a narrative, and you're the villain in his story. Then I'll give him a real villain. Wednesday morning brought the kind of Texas heat that makes asphalt soft and tempers shorter. I was supposed to meet Sarah at the courthouse for a preliminary hearing, but first I had business to attend to. I drove my F-250 to the Sullivan construction yard and loaded it with everything I'd need. Sledgehammer, pry bar, concrete saw, and a few other tools of the trade. Then I headed across town to Diego's new location. Because despite his shop burning down, Diego hadn't left town. Instead, he'd rented a chair at Premier Cuts, an upscale salon in the shopping district. According to Tommy's intelligence gathering, he was telling everyone that the fire only made him stronger, that he wasn't going to be intimidated by small-minded people. Time to adjust his perspective. Premier Cuts sat in a strip mall between a yoga studio and an organic smoothie place. Lots of glass, lots of chrome, the kind of place where haircuts cost $100 and came with complimentary wine. Diego's Mustang was parked right in front, gleaming in the morning sun. I parked my truck at the far end of the lot and walked over to the salon. Through the window, I could see Diego working on a client, gesturing animatedly while he trimmed the man's hair. He looked relaxed, confident, happy. That was about to change. I walked back to my truck, fired up the engine, and put it in gear. The F-250 is a serious piece of machinery. 3/4-ton diesel engine, steel bumper that could punch through a brick wall. I'd used it to clear debris, push disabled equipment, and move obstacles that smaller vehicles couldn't handle. Today, it was going to make a statement. I accelerated across the parking lot, aiming for the salon's front window. At the last second, I saw Diego look up, his eyes going wide as he realized what was happening. The truck hit the glass at 30 miles per hour. The window exploded inward in a shower of sparkling fragments. Display cases toppled, mirrors shattered, chairs flew across the room like toys. The front end of my truck came to rest against the reception desk, steam rising from the radiator. Through the ringing in my ears, I heard screaming. I climbed out of the cab, brushing glass from my shirt. The salon was in chaos. Customers cowered behind overturned furniture, stylists pressed against the back wall, and Diego stood frozen in the middle of it all, scissors still in his hand. "You," I said, pointing at him. "Outside. Now." "Are you insane?" he shouted. "You could have eliminated someone." "I'm very careful about collateral damage." Diego looked around at the destruction, then at the other people in the salon. Whatever he saw in my face convinced him that arguing wasn't wise. We walked outside together, drawing stares from passers-by who'd heard the crash. "What do you want?" Diego asked, his voice shaking. "I want you gone." I thought I made that clear. I can't just leave. I have clients, obligations. I grabbed him by the shirt and slammed him against the brick wall next to the ruined salon. "Your obligations ended when you decided to screw my wife. She's leaving you anyway. We're in love." I punched him. Not a slap or a shove, but a real punch. My fist connecting with his perfect jaw like a sledgehammer hitting concrete. He dropped like a bag of sand. "Get up," I said. Diego struggled to his feet, red fluid running from his split lip. "You're crazy. You're freaking crazy. I'm getting started." I punched him again, this time in the stomach. He doubled over, gasping for air. Around us, people were calling 911, taking pictures with their phones, but I didn't care. This was long overdue. "Please," Diego wheezed. "Stop. Tell me about the money." "What money?" I grabbed his hair and yanked his head up. "The money Vivian's been giving you." "What's it for?" "I don't know what you're talking about." I punched him again, splitting his eyebrow this time. Red fluid ran down his face, mixing with tears. "I saw her hand you cash. What was it for?" "Legal fees." He sobbed. "She was paying legal fees." "Whose legal fees?" "Mine. For the restraining order for the police reports, she said we needed protection from you." It was worse than I'd thought. Vivian wasn't just cheating. She was actively building a case against me, using my own money to fund it. "Where is she now?" "I don't know. She doesn't tell me everything." I was about to punch him again when I heard sirens approaching. Tommy's voice came from behind me. "Tank!" "Cops!" I looked around. 3 police cars were converging on the shopping center, red and blue lights flashing. The smart thing would be to run to try to avoid arrest. Instead, I stood there waiting for them. The first officer out of his car was someone I didn't recognize. Young, eager, hand on his weapon. Step away from him. Hands where I can see them. I raised my hand slowly. No problem, officer. You Marcus Sullivan? That's right. You're under arrest for attack, destruction of property, and violation of a restraining order. As they handcuffed me, I looked back at Diego, still slumped against the wall, his pretty face ruined and crimson. This is just the beginning, I told him. The county jail was exactly what you'd expect. Gray walls, harsh fluorescent lights, and the smell of disinfectant and despair. They processed me through booking, took my fingerprints, and locked me in a cell with a drunk driver and a kid who'd been caught selling dope. I made my one phone call to Sarah. Jesus Christ, Marcus. What were you thinking? I was thinking about sending a message. Well, you sent one. Attack, destruction of property, violation of a restraining order. Chen's going to use this to paint you as a violent lunatic. Maybe I am. Don't say that. Not on a recorded line. Sarah paused. Look, I can get you out on bail, but it's going to be expensive, and there are going to be conditions. What kind of conditions? House arrest, electronic monitoring, no contact with Vivian or Diego, no booze. And Marcus? Yeah? If you screw up again even a little bit, you're looking at serious prison time. Bail was set at $50,000. Tommy mortgaged his house to cover it, refusing to listen when I told him not to. You do the same for me, he said as we walked out of the courthouse. Besides, Maria's already planning where we're going to hide your body if you make me lose my house. The ankle monitor was a thick plastic bracelet that chafed against my skin and beeped every few hours to confirm I was still alive. House arrest meant I could only leave my motel room for work, legal appointments, and grocery shopping. Everything else was off limits. It felt like being buried alive. But the isolation gave me time to think, to plan. Sarah visited daily, updating me on the legal situation. Chen was moving fast, filing motions to seize my business assets permanently, claiming I was mentally unstable and a danger to myself and others. He's not wrong about the danger part, Sarah said during one visit. Marcus, that stunt at the salon could have eliminated someone. But it didn't. That's not the point. You're playing into his hands. Every crazy thing you do validates his narrative. So what do you suggest? Let me do my job. Fight this in court, where the rules matter. The rules haven't been working so far, because you keep breaking them. That night, alone in my motel room, I opened my laptop and began researching Robert Chen. If I was going to war, I needed to know my enemy. Chen had been practicing law for 23 years, specializing in high-stakes divorce cases. His clients included oil executives, tech entrepreneurs, and old-money socialites, people with serious assets to protect or steal. His success rate was impressive. 93% of his cases ended with favorable settlements for his clients. But success in the legal world often comes with compromises. Chen had been censured twice by the state bar for questionable tactics, and there were rumors of bribery, witness intimidation, and manufactured evidence. Nothing proven, but enough smoke to suggest fire. I dug deeper, using skills I'd learned in the Army and contacts from my construction business. Chen owned a house in River Oaks worth $2 million. He drove a Bentley, belonged to 3 country clubs, and took vacations to places where hotel rooms cost more than most people made in a month. All of this on a lawyer's salary. The more I researched, the clearer it became that Chen was dirty. The question was how to prove it without landing myself in federal prison. That's when I remembered the forensic accountant Sarah had used to trace Vivian's shell company. If Chen was laundering money or hiding assets, a good accountant might be able to find the trail. I called Sarah at midnight. This better be important, she said, her voice thick with sleep. I need you to run a financial background check on Robert Chen. Marcus, it's midnight. And why would I? Because he's dirty. I can feel it. If we can prove he's been committing fraud or tax evasion, we can get him disbarred and maybe sent to prison. That's a big if. And even if you're right, it doesn't solve your immediate problems. It solves the biggest one. Without Chen, Vivian's just another cheating wife trying to steal half of something she didn't build. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I'll make some calls. But Marcus, this is dangerous territory. If Chen finds out we're investigating him, let me worry about Chen. 3 days later, Sarah called with news that changed everything. You were right, she said. Chen's dirty as hell. What did you find? Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, shell companies in Delaware, and about $3 million in assets that don't match his reported income. How? He's been skimming from client settlements, taking a percentage and hiding it overseas. The IRS is going to be very interested in this information. What about Vivian? That's where it gets interesting. Remember that shell company she set up? Southwest Property Solutions? Chen's been using it to funnel money through. She's not just his client, she's his accomplice. I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Hope. Can we use this? Oh, we can more than use it. Marcus, this is enough to bring down Chen's entire practice. But there's a catch. What kind of catch? The evidence was obtained through questionable means. If Chen's lawyers can prove we hacked into his accounts or bribed someone for information, it'll be inadmissible. So what do? We find another way to get the same information, legally. That night I called Detective Ray Morrison. Ray, I need another favor. Tank, I've already stuck my neck out for you more than I should have. This is different. I have information about a lawyer who's been committing tax fraud and money laundering. What kind of information? The kind that could put him away for 20 years. Ray was quiet for a moment. You talking about Robert Chen? You know him? Know of him. We've been looking at some of his clients for organized crime connections, if you've got something solid. I've got bank records, shell company documents, the works, but I need law enforcement to discover it independently. Jesus, Tank. You're asking me to build a case based on illegally obtained evidence. I'm asking you to investigate a criminal who's been stealing from his clients and hiding money offshore. Another pause. Send me what you have. I'll see what I can do. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. I was drinking coffee and watching the news when someone knocked on my motel room door. Through the peephole, I saw 2 men in dark suits. Federal agents, by the look of them. Mr. Sullivan, FBI. We'd like to ask you some questions. I opened the door. About what? The taller agent, a guy with premature gray hair and suspicious eyes, held up his badge. Agent Davidson, this is Agent Chen, no relation to the lawyer. We are investigating financial irregularities involving your divorce proceedings. Come in. They sat on the motel room's 2 chairs while I perched on the edge of the bed. The room suddenly felt very small. Mr. Sullivan, Agent Davidson said, are you aware that your wife has been moving large amounts of money through offshore accounts? I'm aware she's been stealing from our joint accounts. It's more than that. We believe she's part of a larger money laundering operation. Robert Chen, her attorney, is under investigation for multiple financial crimes. This was moving faster than I'd expected. What kind of crimes? Tax evasion, wire fraud, money laundering, the works. Agent Chen, the federal one, leaned forward. We think your wife was recruited as an accomplice. Her shell company has been used to hide nearly $5 million in stolen client funds. $5 million. Jesus. What do you need from me? Cooperation. Information. Help us build a case against Chen and we'll make sure the charges against you are reduced or dropped entirely. What about my wife? The agents exchanged glances. That depends on how much she knew and when she knew it. If she was just a pawn in Chen's game, we might be able to work something out. if she was a willing participant. They didn't need to finish the sentence. I'll help however I can. After the FBI left, I called Sarah to tell her about the visit. This is huge, Marcus. If the feds are building a RICO case against Chen, your divorce problems just became the least of his worries. What about Vivian? If she's smart, she'll cooperate and testify against Chen. If she's not… Sarah paused. Marcus, there's something else. I got a call from Chen's office this morning. They want to meet. About what? Settlement negotiations. Chen wants to discuss terms. Terms for what? Apparently, they're willing to drop the restraining order and reduce their financial demands in exchange for your cooperation in certain matters. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. They want me to keep my mouth shut about the money laundering. That's my guess. The question is, do you want to hear what they're offering? I thought about it, about Vivian, about the business I'd built, about the life I'd planned to live. All of it was gone now, burned to ash by greed and betrayal. Set up the meeting. We met at Chen's downtown office, a glass tower that screamed money and power. His suite was on the 30th floor, with views of the city that probably cost more than most people's houses. Chen himself was smaller than I'd expected, maybe 5'6", with soft hands and the kind of smile that made you want to check your wallet. Vivian sat beside him, looking nervous but defiant. Marcus, she said when I walked in, thank you for coming. I didn't respond, just took the chair across from them and waited. Mr. Sullivan, Chen began, I think we can resolve this situation amicably. You're facing serious criminal charges, your business is in jeopardy, and frankly, this has all spiraled out of control. I'm listening. We're prepared to offer a very generous settlement. You keep 60% of your business assets, we drop the restraining order, and you're free to rebuild your life. In exchange for what? Chen's smile tightened. Your discretion regarding certain financial matters that have come to light during our investigation. You mean your money laundering operation? Vivian's eyes widened. Chen's face went pale. I'm sure I don't know what you mean, Chen said carefully. Sure you do. Offshore accounts, shell companies, skimming from client settlements. The FBI knows about all of it. Chen stood up quickly, his chair rolling backward. This meeting is over. No, it's not. I remained seated, looking at Vivian. Did you know? About the money laundering? The fraud? Or were you just a useful idiot? I don't have to listen to this, she said, but her voice shook. The FBI thinks you're an accomplice. $5 million in stolen money flowed through your shell company. That's federal prison, Vivian. 25 to life. She turned to Chen, panic in her eyes. You said it was legal. You said… Shut up, Chen hissed. Don't say another word. But it was too late. I'd seen the truth in her face. Vivian hadn't known about the full scope of Chen's crimes. She'd been used, manipulated, turned into an accomplice without realizing it. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered the video of her and Diego, the stolen money, the elaborate plan to destroy my life, and the sympathy evaporated. Here's my counteroffer, I said, standing. You drop all claims against my assets, you dissolve the shell company, and you pray the FBI doesn't find enough evidence to indict you for conspiracy. And if we refuse? Chen asked. I smiled. Then I testify against both of you at your federal trial. Chen tried to bluster, to threaten, to negotiate, but he was a drowning man now, and we all knew it. The FBI had him cold on the money laundering, and my cooperation would seal the case. Think it over, I said, heading for the door. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. That evening, Tommy and I sat in a bar outside the city limits, celebrating with whiskey and planning the future. So what happens now? Tommy asked. Now we wait. Chen's finished. Even if he beats the federal charges, the state bar will disbar him. Vivian's looking at serious prison time unless she cooperates fully with the FBI. And you, The attack charges will probably stick, but with Chen out of the picture, the other stuff goes away. I'll do some community service, pay a fine, rebuild the business." Tommy raised his glass. "To new beginnings. To justice." We drank, and for the first time in months, I felt something like peace. But peace, I was about to learn, is a fragile thing. The next morning brought news that shattered my newfound optimism. Tommy called at dawn, his voice tight with controlled rage. "Tank, you need to get down to the office now. What's wrong?" "Just get here." I drove through the empty streets as fast as the ankle monitor would allow, my mind racing through possibilities. When I pulled into the Sullivan construction lot, I saw the problem immediately. Every piece of equipment in the yard had been vandalized. Windows smashed, tires slashed, hydraulic lines cut. 20 years of building and buying, millions of dollars in machinery, reduced to scrap metal and broken glass. But that wasn't the worst part. Spray painted across the side of my office building, in red letters 6 feet tall, was a message. "Dead man walking." "Jesus Christ," I breathed. Tommy appeared beside me, his face grim. "It gets worse." "How?" "3 of our guys were jumped last night. Rodriguez is in the hospital with a broken arm. Sanchez got his car firebombed. Williams." Tommy paused. "Williams is dead, Tank." My vision blurred. "What?" "Someone ran him off the road out on Highway 6. Made it look like an accident, but the skid marks tell a different story." "Williams." "Mike Williams, 26 years old, married with a baby on the way. He'd been working for me for 4 years, was supposed to get promoted to crew chief next month." "Who did this?" "Chen's got connections. Mob lawyers don't work alone. They've got muscle on call. Word is, he put out a contract on you, but when they couldn't get close because of the ankle monitor, they went after my people instead." That's the theory. I stared at the destruction, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. This wasn't about divorce anymore, or even money. This was war. "Get everyone together," I said quietly. "All the guys, their families. We're going to have a meeting." "Tank, do it." An hour later, 67 people crowded into the warehouse that served as our equipment storage. Men and women who'd trusted me to provide for their families, who'd followed me from job site to job site, who'd built something meaningful with their hands and their sweat. Now one of them was dead because of my fight with Vivian and Chen. "I know you all heard about Mike," I began, looking out at faces filled with anger, fear, and confusion. "I know you're scared, and I know some of you are wondering if this job is worth the risk." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I'm here to tell you it's not. Nobody should die because of my problems, so if anyone wants to walk away, do it now. No hard feelings, no blacklisting. I'll give you references, help you find work somewhere safe." Nobody moved. "What about Mike's family?" called out Rodriguez, his arm in a sling from the previous night's knocking. "I'll take care of them. Life insurance, college fund for the baby, whatever they need." "And the fools who eliminated him?" That was Sanchez, whose car was still smoldering in the police impound lot. "Leave that to me." "Bees," Tommy said from the back of the room. "This isn't your fight anymore, Tank. It's ours. Mike was our brother. They want to play rough? We'll show them rough." A chorus of agreement rose from the crowd. These weren't just employees anymore. They were family, and family protects its own. "Listen to me," I said, raising my voice. "If we do this, there's no going back. We're not just fighting Chen and whoever he hired. We're fighting the system that protects men like him." "So?" called out Maria Santos, Tommy's wife. "Systems never protected us before." More agreements. I looked around the room, seeing determination in every face. These people had made their choice. "All right," I said. "Then let's give them a war they'll never forget." The plan came together over the next 3 days. We couldn't match Chen's connections or his money, but we had something he didn't. 67 people who knew how to build things and, more importantly, how to tear them down. Construction workers understand infrastructure. We know where the power lines run, where the water mains connect, which roads can handle heavy traffic and which ones can't. We know how to read blueprints, how to spot weak points in a structure, how to make small problems into big ones. Chen owned property all over the city, office buildings, rental houses, shopping centers. His ill-gotten gains were tied up in real estate that generated income and provided tax shelters. We were going to turn his assets into liabilities. The first target was a strip mall Chen owned in the suburbs. Nothing fancy, just a dozen storefronts that rented to small businesses. But the building had problems. Old electrical systems, questionable plumbing, foundation issues that a good inspector might miss, but a construction crew would spot immediately. We didn't break anything. We just accelerated existing problems. A small water leak became a major pipe burst. A loose electrical connection became a fire hazard. A crack in the foundation became a structural concern that required immediate evacuation. Within a week, Chen's strip mall was a condemned building. His tenants were suing for damages, and his insurance company was investigating possible fraud. The second target was personal. Chen's house in River Oaks sat on 2 acres of manicured lawn, surrounded by a wall that was more for show than security. The landscaping alone probably cost more than most people's annual salary. We didn't touch the house. Instead, we focused on the systems that made modern life possible. The electrical transformer that fed his neighborhood developed problems. Rolling blackouts became common. The water pressure in his area dropped to a trickle. Cell phone towers in the vicinity experienced mysterious outages. Chen found himself living in a $2 million house with no power, no water, and no communication with the outside world. But the real masterstroke was the construction project we started across the street. Officially, we were hired to install a new sewer line for the city, a legitimate contract we'd bid on months earlier. The work required heavy equipment, round-the-clock operation, and lots of noise. Unofficially, we made sure the project took twice as long as necessary and generated 10 times more disruption than required. Jackhammers started at 6 in the morning. Concrete trucks arrived every hour. Generators ran all night, powering floodlights that turned night into day. Chen's exclusive neighborhood became a construction zone from hell. Within 2 weeks, he was fielding complaints from every neighbor, lawsuits from the homeowners association, and threats from people who'd paid millions for peace and quiet. The third phase was the most dangerous, hitting Chen where he kept his real money. Through Sarah's investigation and my own research, we'd identified 3 offshore accounts where Chen had hidden his stolen funds. The money was protected by layers of shell companies and international banking laws, but it wasn't untouchable. If we could prove the money came from criminal activity, the FBI could seize it under federal forfeiture laws. The trick was getting the proof without committing crimes ourselves. That's where Detective Ray Morrison earned his paycheck. "You're asking me to run an undercover operation against a sitting attorney," Ray said when I laid out the plan. "Do you have any idea how dangerous that is? Do you have any idea how many people Chen has destroyed? How many families he's ruined?" Ray rubbed his temples. "Even if I wanted to help, and I'm not saying I do, how would we get close enough to document his crimes?" "Leave that to me." The key was Vivian. Despite everything that had happened between us, she was still legally my wife. Chen had been using her shell company to launder money, which made her both an accomplice and a potential witness. But Vivian wasn't a criminal mastermind. She was a real estate agent who'd gotten in over her head, manipulated by a man who made his living destroying families. If I could get her to cooperate, to wear a wire and record Chen discussing his illegal activities, the FBI would have everything they needed to seize his assets and put him away for life. The problem was approaching her without violating the restraining order. That's where Tommy came in. "You want me to what?" he asked when I explained the plan. Talk to her. Explain the situation. Make her understand that cooperation is her only way out of this mess. Tank, she betrayed you. She tried to steal your business, your life. Why would you want to save her now? Because she's not the real enemy. Chen is. And because. I paused, trying to find the right words. Because she's still the mother of the children we never had. The woman I loved for 20 years. I can't just let her go to prison for someone else's crimes. Tommy stared at me like I'd lost my mind. You're too good for this world, Tank. You know that? Maybe I was, or maybe I was just tired of hating. The meeting took place at a diner outside the city, neutral ground where Vivian could feel safe. Tommy went in first, followed by Detective Morrison in civilian clothes. I waited in the parking lot, monitoring police frequencies to make sure we weren't walking into a trap. Through the window, I watched Vivian enter alone. She looked older, worn down by weeks of stress and legal battles. When she sat across from Tommy, her hands shook as she reached for her coffee cup. They talked for an hour. Tommy explained the situation, the FBI investigation, the evidence against Chen. He laid out her options: cooperate and receive immunity, or face conspiracy charges that could put her away for decades. When they finished, Vivian sat alone for a long time, staring into her coffee like it held the answers to all her problems. Finally, she pulled out her phone and made a call. 30 minutes later, Sarah Kim walked into the diner and sat down across from my wife. They talked for another hour, hammering out the details of a cooperation agreement. Vivian would wear a wire, record conversations with Chen, and testify before a grand jury. In exchange, she'd receive immunity from prosecution and protection from Chen's criminal associates. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was justice. The wire operation took place the following week. FBI technicians fitted Vivian with a digital recording device disguised as a jewelry clasp, barely visible against her dark blazer. The plan was simple. Vivian would meet with Chen to discuss her concerns about the federal investigation. If he tried to pressure her into silence or offered to help her flee the country, the recording would provide evidence of obstruction of justice and conspiracy. If he admitted to money laundering or discussed his criminal activities, the FBI would have everything they needed for a conviction. I watched from a surveillance van parked 2 blocks away, listening to every word through FBI headphones. "Robert, I'm scared," Vivian said as she entered Chen's office. "The FBI asked me questions I couldn't answer. They know about the shell company." "Calm down," Chen replied, his voice tight with stress. "They're fishing. They don't have real evidence." "But what if they do? What if Marcus told them something? Your husband doesn't know anything." "He's a construction worker, not an accountant." Agent Davidson, sitting beside me in the van, shook his head. "Wrong answer, counselor." Vivian pressed harder. "But the money, Robert. The $5 million that went through Southwest Property Solutions. How do I explain that?" "You don't explain anything. You take the Fifth Amendment and keep your mouth shut." "And if they offer me immunity?" There was a long pause. Then Chen's voice, lower now, more dangerous. "Vivian, you need to understand something. The people I work with don't accept failure. If you cooperate with the FBI, if you testify against me, there will be consequences." "What kind of consequences?" "The kind that make problems disappear permanently." Agent Davidson smiled grimly. "Bingo. Witness intimidation, obstruction of justice, and implied threats of violence. That's a federal conspiracy charge." The recording continued for another 20 minutes, with Chen digging himself deeper with every word. He admitted to moving money offshore, discussed bribing judges, and even mentioned the contract he'd put out on me. By the time Vivian left his office, the FBI had enough evidence to bring down Chen's entire operation. The arrests came at dawn. Federal agents hit Chen's house, his office, and 6 other locations simultaneously. They seized computers, files, and financial records. They froze bank accounts in 3 countries and issued warrants for associates from Miami to Las Vegas. Chen himself was arrested in his pajamas, dragged from his River Oaks mansion in handcuffs, while news cameras recorded every humiliating moment. Diego Morales was picked up at a motel near the airport, where he'd been hiding since his barbershop burned down. Turns out he'd been more than just Vivian's lover. He'd been Chen's money courier, moving cash between shell companies and offshore accounts. The corruption went deeper than anyone had imagined. Chen's client list read like a who's who of organized crime, and his methods made my truck through the window stunt look like a parking violation. But victory came with a price. The ankle monitor came off 3 days after Chen's arrest, but my legal problems weren't over. The attack charges stuck, resulting in 6 months of community service and a fine that cleaned out my savings account. Sullivan Construction survived, but barely. The equipment damage cost nearly $1 million to repair, and several contracts had been canceled during the chaos. I had to lay off 20 people and sell half my machinery just to stay afloat. Vivian disappeared after testifying before the grand jury. The divorce was finalized in absentia, with her claiming only what she'd legally contributed to the marriage, basically nothing. I heard through mutual friends that she'd moved to California, started over with a new name and a new life. I never saw her again. Diego Morales pled guilty to money laundering and received 5 years in federal prison. His pretty face wouldn't be quite so pretty when he got out. Chen himself got 25 to life on multiple federal charges. His assets were seized, his sufferers received restitution, and his law license was permanently revoked. Justice, but not satisfaction. Mike Williams was buried on a Tuesday morning under gray skies that matched the mood of everyone who'd known him. His widow, Sarah, was 8 months pregnant and looked lost without the man who'd promised to take care of her forever. I stood at the graveside with the rest of my crew, listening to a priest talk about eternal rest and divine justice. But all I could think about was how Mike had died because of my fight with a cheating wife and a corrupt lawyer. That night, alone in my office, I opened a bottle of whiskey and stared at the photo on my desk. Not the wedding picture. I'd thrown that away months ago. This was a picture of my crew at last year's Christmas party, all of us grinning at the camera, Mike Williams front and center with his arm around his pregnant wife. He'd been 26 years old with calloused hands and an honest heart. He'd died because he worked for a man who couldn't let go of his anger, couldn't walk away from a fight that had already cost too much. I finished the whiskey and made a decision that would define the rest of my life. The next morning, I called my lawyer. "Sarah, I want to liquidate the business. Marcus, you can't be serious. You've put 20 years into Sullivan Construction, and in 1 week it got a good man eliminated. I'm done. Think about this rationally. Chen's in prison, Vivian's gone, your legal troubles are over, you can rebuild. With what? Half my equipment's destroyed, my reputation's shot, and every time I look at my crew, I see Mike Williams' ghost." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "What will you do?" "I don't know. Travel, maybe. Find somewhere quiet where construction workers don't get eliminated over divorce proceedings." It took 3 months to sell everything. The equipment went to competitors who paid fair prices and promised to keep my remaining employees. The office building was leased to a tech startup that probably wouldn't last 2 years, but had enough venture capital to cover the rent. I kept only my pickup truck, my tools, and enough money to start over somewhere else. Tommy tried to talk me out of leaving. "This is your home, Tank. Your life. You can't just walk away." "Mike Williams can't walk anywhere. His kid's going to grow up without a father because I couldn't let go of my pride." "That's not your fault, isn't it?" Chen put out the contract, but I'm the one who started the war. I'm the one who crashed my truck through that salon window, who escalated things beyond any reasonable response. You were defending yourself. I was getting revenge. There's a difference. We stood in the empty warehouse that had once housed millions of dollars in construction equipment. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like ghosts of what used to be. "Where will you go?" Tommy asked. "North, maybe. Montana, Alaska. Somewhere I can build things without worrying about who I'm building them for." "You'll stay in touch?" "Of course." But we both knew better. Some chapters end completely, with no sequels or epilogues. I drove out of town on a Wednesday morning, my pickup loaded with everything I owned. In the rearview mirror, I watched the city skyline shrink and disappear, taking with it 20 years of marriage, 15 years of business, and one good man's life. The road stretched ahead, empty and full of possibilities. I'd won the war against Vivian and Chen, but victory felt like ashes in my mouth. Sometimes the good guys win, but at a cost that makes winning feel like losing. Sometimes the monster you become to fight monsters doesn't disappear when the battle's over, and sometimes the only redemption available is in walking away before you destroy anything else you love. The highway sign read, "You are now leaving Texas. Come back soon." I didn't plan to.